Alright, class. Nonsense 101. You ready for today's lesson? Today's lesson is superpowers that have the same vibes. You could actually say that I'm a bit of a superhero academic. I have like 13 textbooks in my bookshelf just about superheroes and superpowers. So here's the thing. I was like, I can actually be serious about this. I have a lot of thoughts about superheroes. I decided, you know what? There's some classic superpowers that are basically just the same thing. Or they have like similar enough vibes where you're just kind of like, they're used essentially the same way. So I wanted to talk about that. So today we're talking about superpowers that have the same vibes, classic superpowers only, and we're going through them in order of which I'd want IRL. Will this presentation include what superpower Fern would have? No, it does not, because if we're being honest, the superpower I would have is probably the most useful one, in my opinion, which is in X2, from the X-Men franchise. There's the scene, no, it was in X-Men. It was in the first movie, because it was when Rogue was being walked around the school to see all of the different kids with the superpowers, and she's about to meet Bobby, aka Iceman, who we all know in the comics is actually gay, but we're breezing past that. And then there's this girl who's in class taking notes as Professor Xavier is doing his whole spiel. And you know what her power is? Her entire power is just hovering her hand over pieces of paper and words come out like ink. And she doesn't have to write or scribble. She just like puts words down on paper like that. I feel like that would most likely be the superpower I have. Note taking is the best superpower. That's what I'm saying. I feel like it'd be so useful. Not to be that person, but imagine how slick you would be if you're like, oh yeah, here's my number. And you just put hover your hand over somebody. That'd be insane. For your superpower is a laptop. That's what I'm saying. If I'm being honest, that would most likely be my superpower because I'm attached to the computer like 16 hours a day. So this is a good choice. Most superpowers would fuck you up, actually, which is what we're going to talk about today. Great segue, Tomo. So we are going to start off. We're going to cover essentially 10 superpowers. Of those 10, I'm comparing them in pairs. So we're essentially doing 5 different sections, so to speak. Those sections, I'm going to give my reasons as to why I think they're similar in vibes, what I think their everyday use could potentially be, and why or why not I think they would be useful to have in real life. So our first set of superpowers that have basically the same vibes. Intangibility and invisibility. They're not the exact same power. None of these powers are exactly the same. They're all just kind of, they're similar enough. Like functionally, I feel like they're hanging out. They're in the same clique. They eat lunch together. Mostly useless, bruh, the controversy. I said there was gonna be some. And you can disagree with me. However, this is, once again, my stream, and once again, my lesson. And as Freud said in his paper about comedy, unless people can give me correct evidence proving the contrary, I will stand by my convictions. And we all love Freud. We all know he was a complete and total crazy asshole. So, useless for what? Okay, here. It's cool, but mostly useless because, like, let's be honest, everyday life, when do you need to be invisible? Why would you need to be invisible? That's fucking weird. Why do you need to be invisible for? Like, most people already fade into the background. You don't need to be invisible unless you're spying on people. You don't need to be intangible, It'd be kind of cool because then you don't have to, like, walk all around the freaking house to get to another room, but it's also, like, not the most useful superpower. These are all being ranked based on how useful they are for a secretary. Yes, we are not ranking this according to combat. Again, the presentation is not that. It's in order of which I would want in real life. In real life, I don't need to be intangible. In fact, somebody who's as clumsy as I am, probably not a good thing to be intangible. I would just go through the floor all the time. How do you get back up? The like existential parts of intangibility stress me out so much. What if you get stuck in a wall? What if you get stuck in the floor? It's scary. And invisibility. Look, there's a lot of really cool superheroes with these powers. Ultimately, they wouldn't be super useful in everyday life, and I stand by that. Also, they have very bad connotations with them. They give off major creepy vibes because either people are going to assume you're stealing shit or they're going to assume that you're creeping on people. And I don't like either of those. I don't want people to assume that I'm just turning invisible and hanging out where I'm not supposed to hang out, you know? It's weird. Let's be real. If we lived in a world where there were superpowers and you were, I don't know, in the grocery store and just turn invisible, people are gonna think that you're doing weird shit. You turn invisible in the bathroom. Everybody's gonna leave the bathroom. They don't know what you're up to, you know? It's weird. Yeah, is Danny Phantom a creep? Look, there was an entire episode of Danny Phantom where there's a dude from the 1950s who was bullied and picked on a lot. And they do this whole like time travel reversal thing where they switch bodies and he's in Danny's body. And what does he do? He goes and he creeps in the girls' locker room. He goes through the lockers and creeps on them. He is a ghost hero. I'm just saying the connotations are there. And I'm not saying that I would or that anybody else would personally abuse intangibility or invisibility, but people would think that you were. People would think about it, and that sucks. I don't want people thinking that. There are no slides on Danny Phantom, therefore I cannot absorb this part of the lesson. Yes, you can, because it is literally the next slide. So intangibility, some cool and notable heroes. Kitty Pryde, she's amazing. She's one of the best X-Men ever. A little weird that it wasn't Jack Kirby who wrote the X-Men. Was it? I don't remember who wrote the X-Men, but he created Kitty Pryde to look exactly like a girl he went to high school with. Weird. A little weird. And it did get on her nerves for a while until she was like, you know what, but Kitty Pryde is awesome. And then she was all about it. Because Kitty Pryde is awesome. Kitty Pryde is great, and so is Danny Phantom. I love both of them. They're two of my favorite superheroes. He can walk through walls, disappear, and fly. I'm not hating on it. I think all of the superpowers that are on this list are great. But ultimately, the question isn't whether these superpowers are great, it's, would I want them in real life, yes or no? And I'm just too anxious. I'm just a little too socially anxious to want to have either intangibility or invisibility because of the implications. Oh my gosh, it would be super useful too, because like being intangible, imagine being able to be intangible when you're at a festival, like a music festival. You could just walk through the crowds and get all the way up to the front if you wanted. That'd be sick. It's useless for minutes ago, it's useful for presently. I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, how much use are you getting out of the power? I don't think you're going to get that much out of it. Especially in comparison to the rest of the ones on this list. Friend contained multitudes, I do. This presentation is actually just a fancy tier list. Look, I knew that you guys were going to say this as soon as I started drafting up this presentation. Like I said, I could have done a more serious superhero presentation. I could have gone a little bit more into the psychology and all this kinds of stuff and how, like, you know, Iron Man was as successful as it was in the time that it was because as a movie it like came out post 9/11 and blah blah blah, so we were very much like thinking about militarism at that time and how that set the mood and the like, you know, it set the tone for the type of male superheroes we wanted in, like, media. So that's why we ended up getting a bunch of, like, snarky superheroes going forward, even though some of them weren't actually written to be snarky. I could go on and on. However, I thought this would be more fun. Okay, next one. Invisibility, some cool and notable heroes. See, again, I don't hate invisibility. Miles Morales can go invisible. That's cool as heck. It's one of the things that, like, makes him stand out in the Spider-Verse movies and, like, makes him his own version of Spider-Man. Also, it's just sick that they were just like, what else can spiders do? And they can camouflage, which was a really cool thing. Susan Storm. I had mixed feelings about the Fantastic Four. I think, in general, the comics are pretty solid. It's a good team, solid team. Susan Storm was very important for a lot of women, especially early on in, like, comic books. She was, like, for the most part, not dressed super in basically underwear or BDSM wear. Like, you know, she's usually wearing a full suit. Skin tight, though it might be, but it is a full jumpsuit. She's really smart, really intelligent, as well as being beautiful. And, you know, she's Susan fucking Storm. She's great. A little boring, though. She's a little boring, just a little bit. I'm sorry. But it's cool that she can turn invisible. Will this presentation include, for instance, on The Incredibles? The Incredibles is one of the best movies out there. One of the best Pixar movies, period. I'm very glad that you brought this up. So, Violet is basically just Susan Storm, right? She turns invisible, she has force fields. It's clearly like, hey, this is Susan Storm, but we're gonna put it as a teenage girl and we're gonna discuss invisibility in the consciousness of, like, a kid feeling invisible, a teen feeling invisible, and, like, wanting to, like, shield herself and shield her family, shield herself away from other people, but also shield, like, the people around her that are really important. She's great. I loved it. I love the movie. Also, the fact that they actually had Helen Parr say, like, actual like military aviation terms while she's, like, on those headsets and stuff. Like, it's tracks. It's good. I like the reveal of Syndrome. I think that's sick as hell. Incredibles 2, I liked it. It made me a little upset that I liked the B plot more than the A plot, though. Like, the fact that I was way more invested in, like, the family dynamic, which honestly was more the A plot than the B plot, I guess. But the villain was just, like, so obvious from the beginning. It was so obvious that she was gonna be the bad guy. Because, like, she gave bad guy vibes, you know? And it was just, like, the brother was just, like, so cheery. So you kind of wanted to believe that he was normal. And if he wasn't, it was gonna be fine because they were already framing him as, like, the potential culprit. I didn't think it was that good of a reveal. I like the powers that they played with. I like that they tried to make her a foil to Helen because they were just like, in the first movie, it's Bob versus Syndrome. So they had to, like, make them foils to an extent. And then in the second one, they were just like, it's Helen and this lady, two strong women. How do we, like, show that they're foils? Oh, because they're gabbing. These women are gabbing and really getting along. And I don't know, that kind of annoyed me. Not gonna lie, I was just like, really? You're gonna show me, like, an interesting, potentially, female friendship only to be like, JK, she betrays you, and when it's obvious that that's where it's heading the entire time. But is it an overall good movie? Yes, it is. It is an overall good movie. Do I like the dynamics of the family? Yes, I do. Do I like how they portray the superpowers and the questions that they pose when it comes to those superpowers? Yes, I do. Which is why I think The Incredibles overall, top tier franchise. But yeah, Incredibles 2. It had, like, really good moments. Really, really great moments. And then just some other that were just like, meh. I thought the fights were really cool. I will say that. I thought the fights were really cool and the investigation parts were cool. I would have liked it more if it wasn't that obvious that that's what they were doing. I appreciate that you appreciate The Incredibles too. I heard kind of bad things about it, but I kind of liked it. I thought it was pretty good overall. I liked it a lot, but I do think the first one is better. I was, like, basically pleased. It's just like, I wanted a better villain. I think that's what it really came down to. Because I didn't hate her as a villain. I just think they could have been a little bit more nuanced about it. And that bummed me out. Okay, next section. So we have talked about Intangibility versus invisibility. We've talked about some examples of both of these types of superpowers. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this guy is, he plays Ramsay Bolton in Game of Thrones, but he plays this guy called, I don't know the actor's name, but in the show, he's called Simon, and he's one of the main characters, main heroes of the show called The Misfits, which is where Robert Sheehan, who plays number 4 in The Umbrella Academy, that was like one of his big standout roles. Way back when? Early, mid-2000s? But this character turns invisible. And I feel like that's a really cool one. They did that invisibility trope pretty well with him as well. Okay, next one. Super strength and telekinesis. Overall, incredibly useful powers in my opinion. Also, very, very cool. Top tier superpowers for both of them. Being really strong sounds awesome. Having telekinesis sounds really cool as well. There's been multiple instances in my life, particularly when I'm parallel parking, where I'm just like, I wish I had telekinesis just to nudge those cars over a little bit more because they didn't need that much room. And then if they actually parked correctly and I could push them into a correct parking spot, then I could fit, you know? Or times where I'm just like, I don't want to get up to get my phone. You could just like, you know, psychically move your phone closer to you, or the control, or water, or whatever. And super strength, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that you can make that useful. It seems really cool. Like, what if when you're just like hanging out and you have a bag of chestnuts or a bag of walnuts, as you do. We all have that. We all sit down with a giant bag of walnuts. But sometimes you don't want to take out the nutcracker. Sometimes, don't you just think, wouldn't it be nice if I had super strength and I could just crack these nuts? Okay, sorry. But there's a lot of, like, useful things, like, a lot of things that you could do with either one of them, and I feel like they also look cool. However, I do think that both powers would lead to very expensive and unfortunate accidents. And that's the part where I was just like, I don't think I'd want them in real life, because I think you could mess up a lot of stuff really easily. It's almost like if you gave a character both super strength and telekinesis, that would make them extremely overpowered. And that's like one of my big arguments about telekinesis. The Misfits, again, I super recommend it if you haven't watched it, but they have this like really cool part in like the 3rd or 4th season where they like have basically changed all of the main characters already because it's a British show. But one of the guys has telekinesis, and it's like he can move like a can of tomatoes. That's about it, you know? And it's just like, yeah, that's like the big thing. Whenever you see telekinesis in comics or in movies or in TV shows, it's usually somebody has telekinesis and super strength, which is why I was just like, they have the same vibes. Because overall, they're basically used interchangeably. You know, I'm convinced neither invisibility nor intangibility helps with walnuts. That's what I'm saying. Shit, wait. I guess if you're intangible, you can just pull the walnut out. Fuck! So, an example of super strength is, please don't point out the fact that I didn't include the obvious one. The obvious one is coming later. But Shazam, who is one of my favorite superheroes of all time. Shazam with the knowledge of Solomon and the strength of Hercules and all that kind of stuff, you know? He's an incredibly strong dude. Is he technically 10 years old and then says Shazam and turns into a buff 40-year-old? Yes. And I love that for him. The Hulk and She-Hulk, they're both awesome characters and both very fucking strong. So we love it. Ah, Tomo, you're right. I should have put Popeye. Popeye is a superhero. Popeye's super strength. See, and that's a way that we can see super strength being very useful in real life as well. Because we all have to save our girlfriends from Brutus every single day. So we need super strength. Ah, dang. Tomo and JTF, you guys got me there. I will admit. Speaking of, have any of you watched the Popeye the Sailor movie where like Robin Williams plays Popeye? That was one of his like earliest roles ever. It's a movie from like the 60s or something. It's so early when they were doing Technicolor like movies that it basically looks sepia toned the entire time. But he hated doing the movie so much that when he was on the show Mork and Mindy, which was one of his bigger shows, it was the biggest show that he was on. Mork and Mindy, we've talked about Mork and Mindy on this stream before, but he was on Mork and Mindy and there were several jokes throughout the show about Popeye the movie, is how much he hated it. It was so bad. Overall useful, but as you can see from these images, very destructive. And I don't want a lawsuit on my hand, and that's really why it's so far down. Telekinesis, also really cool. Some notable heroes, though I will say that with a caveat, because both are arguably villains at points, but I think they're just badass women who are misunderstood. Jean Grey, look at this. Telekinesis means mind over matter. She's about to get stabbed a bunch with a bunch of knives. And she turns it into this beautiful, beautiful thing that ends up looking a little bit like a snowflake made out of pointy objects. You'll have to see it. And then Carrie. Carrie from the movie Carrie. Or the book. Villains have the best superpowers, it's okay. Yeah, I know, that's why I stand Boomerang Man. I'm sorry, I had to. You said that and the first thing that came to me is like the Flash's Rogue Gallery. And it's like, yeah, Boomerang Man, Mirror Master, Weatherman, Kite Man. Wait, that's Batman. Villains do have the best superpowers though. They're really cool. Although, like I said, I feel like they're anti-heroes in a sense, right? Because, like, they just get pushed too far. And it's not their fault that they're going and causing destructive mayhem. But unfortunately, the cops and the insurance companies will not see it that way. Therefore, I don't really want this power either. So, we've discussed 4 superpowers so far. We discuss... What? Intangibility and invisibility, which are, they have the same vibes. Not the same superpower, but same vibes. Super strength and telekinesis, which are sometimes the same superpower, but overall, same vibes. Now we're gonna get into some superpowers that I'm a lot more like, this would be sick as heck. Not gonna lie. This would be pretty fucking cool. And I would like these as superpowers. But what would it mean? These recaps are why I can tell that Fern has taught many lessons. Oh no, he knows. No, I'd be a better teacher if I asked you guys more questions. I know, I'm getting stressed about the final. Maybe we should do another quiz at the end. We'll do another quiz again. Okay, ready? Healing factor and invulnerability. Same vibes. So healing factor, what do I mean by that? Healing factor, being able to heal really quickly, being able to regenerate really quickly. They're basically the same thing. So I just like lump them into one. Invulnerability is, you know, not able to get hurt as easily. It's one of the best superpowers out there. Because it's just like, you can get fucked up. And it doesn't matter. That's all good. It's almost like being a cartoon, but in real life. Some of the best superheroes have these. Whether it's healing factor or invulnerability, they have some version of the superpower, right? Which again, they're not the same power. They are very similar. So invulnerability is like Steve Rogers, Captain America, right? He has that. He doesn't have the ability to heal. But then you have other superheroes who don't have invulnerability. They get cut up like crazy. But they're able to heal really quickly. So, same vibes, not the same though. But have you considered how you can heal? Because Steven Universe has to lick and or spit on people, and I could never. That is true. Wow, another one that I didn't include in the slideshow that I should have. That is a very good point. That is gross. But it's still one of the top powers, and if I had to lick someone in order to heal them, I'd give them the option, you know. No healing without consent here, obviously. You know, it'd be gross, but you get over it after a while. It is incredibly useful in everyday life. And here's my point, right? Healing factor and invulnerability, even though they seem like, oh, you really need these if you're in combat or if you're in like crazy fights and you don't want to get like killed, you know? Think about the day-to-day uses. You could get better with your knife skills and not worry about being careful. Because you're just like, I'm just gonna chop away. I'm sorry. Okay, real one. You can pick up random ass hobbies and like not fear getting hurt. For example, I've always wanted to learn how to juggle fire. Am I ever gonna try to do it? No, because as I mentioned on an earlier slide with the invulnerability, the intangibility, I'm pretty clumsy and I don't trust myself to not get hurt. However, if I had healing factor or invulnerability, you know I'd be in there. Juggling fire, juggling knives. Just going for it. Imagine you're at a party and you're like, want to see something cool? And you do that dumb knife game that nobody should ever do. Please never play that unless you have these superpowers. In which case, that's the only reason you should be doing that. Swallowing knives, anything like that. If one day you're like, I wonder what a light bulb tastes like, you just eat it. It's gonna be fine. Why not? I don't know if these are good reasons, but they're reasons why I put this way up. Way up, way up. Also, you know, illnesses and stuff like that, it really helps with all that. You would get over it, but would you ever get over the guilt of knowing that every second you don't spend at a hospital licking people is shameful? That is a really good point. I would never get over that. You can play dumb knife game with androids, true. Can't believe Fern is actively encouraging us to play the dumb knife game. I've never done that. In fact, you could have clipped me, and I doubt that you would have been able to get me out of context for that one, so it's not a challenge. It's not a challenge. But yes, don't play the dumb knife game. I'm just saying, if you could heal or be invulnerable, you could. You could play the dumb knife game. Okay. Here's the one thing that I do think is daunting about the healing factor. It's basically the same as immortality. And do I really want to live forever? Yes, I do, personally. Personally, I do. I fear my mortality more than anything else. Death is the number one fear that I've always had in my entire life. And the one thing that made me be like, hey, death is probably a good thing was reading Gulliver's Travels, which is an awful book. I hated reading every moment of it, but I especially hated reading the part where he meets the immortal people, and what he did with the immortality thing was that, like, people are immortal, but their bodies still age. And that sounded fucked up. Anyways, healing factor is not the same thing as immortality, but it's pretty close, and that can be very scary for a lot of people. And very lonely, ultimately. So it's a little stressful. Invulnerability, though, I do think it's better. It makes you safe in any situation. For example, if you were to play the dumb knife game, which you should not, chat. I can't stop you. You are right, the last guy. I cannot stop you. But I can only plead with you. Please do not do it. Please don't do it. Unless you suddenly get invulnerability as a superpower, in which case, I'm not your mom. So overall, invulnerability, in my opinion, is even cooler because you can take way more risk and learn a lot of cool things without fear. Yeah, I'm having none of that monkey's paw superpower immortality, but you still age crap. That's what I mean. That shit fucked me up when I was reading that in high school. I was like, oh, this is awful. I hate this. How many of these cool things involve juggling or bar bets? Quite a few of them. I'm going to say at least 50%. Healing factor. Some cool notable heroes. Deadpool, Wolverine, two of the most famous dudes with the healing factor. Invulnerability. Some cool and notable heroes. Achilles! You know, minus his ankle. Minus his minus his Achilles. But Achilles! And then, of course, the amazing, the incomparable, the badass Luke Cage. Look at this. Man's getting bullets. Boom, 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 boom. Nothing. Stop talking Achilles' weak point, jeez. Oh shit, you're right. That was rude of me. Insensitive, really. Almost as insensitive as Agamemnon giving his daughter up as a sacrifice to the gods in order to win the war. What a fucking nuthead. Let's gossip about the Greeks. You know how unlucky you gotta be to get hit there? For real, though. Achilles, perhaps the most famous example of someone not being invulnerable, and yet he makes it on the slide. He is, though. Just not in one place, you know? It's not his fault. His mom tried to, like, make sure that he was safe and invulnerable, and she had to dip him upside down by the ankle as a little baby into the freaking river. But of course she was holding his ankle, so that spot didn't get wet. You can be kind of invulnerable. You either are or you're not. It's, like, unique. Couldn't mom have dipped her hand in, made Achilles invulnerable, and gotten an invulnerable hand? Shit, you're right. Achilles the vulnerable. Hey, I'm just saying, Achilles is way less vulnerable than I am. And that sounds sick. But I'm also not out there trying to immortalize myself through war and combat, so. Now, the last slight, it might be a little contentious, and I am going to address it a little bit. But this is by far the one that I would choose the most now, as an adult. Flight and teleportation. Look, I'm gonna be real. I already mentioned the driving thing. This sounds like a great alternative. Just being able to zoom, 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 fly wherever I want, teleport wherever I want. Sounds great. I want that. Basically, Fern's superpower is playing Portal 2. Exactly. Who wouldn't want that? Also, I went back and forth about whether making this flight and super speed, because they have the same vibes. But honestly, I feel like flight, super speed, and teleportation all three of them have the same vibes. And I've always chosen super speed as like my go-to. If I could choose a superpower, I would want to choose super speed. But nowadays, I'm just kind of like, teleportation sounds way better. But these are the top ones in my opinion. Because in real life, I think they would be the most useful. And least like existentially dreadful. How do I feel about time powers? Again, we return to the whole existential dread thing. Time powers seem cool if I can only go back, like, maybe up to a day. But otherwise, it just seems like, oh gosh, that's a lot of responsibility. Yeah, Ben Time, like Dishonored, heck yeah, that's true. Slowing down time sounds cool. I always wanted that, especially as a kid. Isn't that like, doesn't every kid want that when you're like 13 and you're like, ugh, I wish I could just stop time and then I'd quickly do my homework right now. And do other stuff that I actually want to do. Wish I could like stop time and, you know, go hang out and go outside. Have recess, even though I'm like 17 and that's not a thing anymore. It'd be sick. I do think stopping time is great. But time powers overall, like being able to rewind time, existential dread. Freaks me out too much. Also, what if you get stuck? Honestly, even a day would probably fuck you up, but at the same time, like, imagine. Live, die, repeat your way through life. See, that's the thing. I think it would freak me out too much. It would just fuck me up way too much. It'd be scary. Time powers would suck for me? Why? Tell me the last cat. Tell me your reason against time powers. I love how we've, like, deviated to other powers now. The more busy the person, the more likely their superpower choice is time stop. Yeah, time stop is great. I would totally choose that, but again, the existential dread and the responsibility and the pressure of being able to manipulate time so freely, I feel like it would mess with someone. And I feel like I'd just get lazier, because I'd be like, I can just stop time later, it's fine. Who cares? I'll just stop time for a little bit and I'll take care of it then. So let's discuss flight and teleportation. #1 classic superpower and its cooler step sibling. Yeah, that's right. I think teleportation is way cooler than flight. Because it is. Flight is cool and everything, but teleporting? That's sick as heck. Not only are these S-tier superpowers, they are also very helpful. In combat, you see most superhero... In combat, you see that most superheroes have a version of one or the other. So, like, almost every superhero has flight. Like, are you kidding me? So many superheroes have flight. Some heroes, their only thing is that they can fly. Like Hawkman and Hawkgirl. Well, they're also strong. So I guess there's that. But they're not, like, super strong in the sense that they were born super strong. They're just, like, buff. Look, flight's cool and all, but I would choose Spider-Man's powers and swing to all the places. Yeah, that one's cool too. See, that's what I mean though. Like, I feel like flight, teleportation, super speed, you know, the Spider-Man webs, all that kind of stuff, that all has to do, they're all the same vibes because they all have to do with movement. You just choose your favorite one, you know? If you can fly, you can always kind of just pretend to swing. Like mime it. That's a good point. So here's my point. In normal everyday life, these would be not just the most useful, but the most awesome superpowers. Because it's just like, I don't have to commute there. I don't have to, like, deal with the 210 or the freaking 405 or any of that kind of stuff. I can just fly over traffic. Like, screw that. Bye. Can't believe breathing underwater was slighted like this. Breathing underwater is great, but it's not like a classic superpower. I don't feel like it is, at least. Maybe that's controversial. I do think it is a really good one, though. Teleporting sounds cool till you land on a coworker. Yeah, that's a good point. But it would be so cool. It's just like, oh, I have to take the elevator. No, you don't. You can just teleport there. Or everybody's taking the elevator. You just fly up the stairs. So useful. Everyday life. It would just be so cool. And not just that, but you get to, like, see a lot of sights that people don't. You could just fly on top of roofs, hang out there for as long as you want. And if you fall, you just fly off. I've seen The Shape of Water. Breathing underwater does have its perks. Ayo. Okay, some examples, some notable heroes who can fly. Superman, Wonder Woman. I could have put Superman for super strength, but I was just like, I feel like it makes the most sense to stick him in for flight. And then, of course, you have the Scarlet Witch, Vision. You also have a bunch of others. You know, you have Hawkgirl, Hawkman. You have, technically, the Green Lantern can fly. Technically. You have Martian Manhunter can fly. You have, who else can fly? Storm can fly. So many of them can fly. It's insane. Birds. Y'all. Okay. And of course, teleportation. Some cool notable heroes. Raven, who you all know I really like because I dressed as her for Halloween, for one of the Halloween streams. And then Nightcrawler, who is one of the best X-Men in my opinion, and it's hugely underrated. That's about every point I have about this. I think teleportation would be the best thing to have. And I rest my case. Flies can fly. That is true. That is a very good point. So can bees. Butterflies fly. I heard all roaches have the ability to fly, some just don't. Yeah, because they all have wings. Roaches are crazy. Have you guys ever seen a hissing cockroach? They're so gross. In 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher, well, he wasn't my teacher, but he was my math teacher. He had a little Komodo dragon in the classroom, and he used to feed it hissing cockroaches. And sometimes he would do it during class. And it was insane. We watched him put a hissing cockroach down in the middle of the classroom, and then we watched the Komodo dragon go and chase it down and then grab it in his mouth, and then you just heard hiss, hiss, hiss. You just heard it hissing and hissing over and over again, and then all of a sudden it stopped because you just heard crack as its jaws clamped down, and it, you know, killed the roach and then ate it. It was wild. Roaches have like half of these superpowers. Stop. Please stop. Okay, chat. Time for your pop quiz. Don't you have to read us that script that teachers read before AP exams or something? It's not an AP exam. This is just a pop quiz. This isn't going to the state. Oh man, are we getting college credit for this? No. This is definitely not an AP class. I don't know who tricked you into believing that, but this does not boost your GPA at all. Nor will it ever count for a college credit. I was told this was 5 credit hours. I don't know, you need to go talk to your counselor, because that's not the case. I can't promise you that. So, our first question is, yo, Danny Phantom, he was just... What was he just? Very important question. We definitely covered this in the material. This is worth 60% of your grade. 14, okay. Open browser test. Danny Phantom. It's gonna catch them all because he's Danny Phantom. What is one reason that super strength in real life could be potentially bad? Well, potentially very regularly a bad thing. It was part of the presentation. Super strength could be bad if you're in a have the most regular strength competition. That, yeah, oh shit, true is true. That is a very compelling argument, Tomo. You're all wrong. You're all wrong. The reason is they're expensive. It's expensive and unfortunate accidents, and we don't want to get sued. Who wants to get sued? Chat, do you want to get sued? Is that what you want? What are they gonna do? Just put me in a prison? I'll break out. I am super strength. Who on this slide is the most invulnerable? Everyone should get a full point on the points on this one. Who is the most invulnerable man on this slide? Cage, okay. Fun Nicolas Cage fact. He, he's Nicolas Coppola, but he took the last name Cage from Luke Cage, who he's a big fan of. He really likes those comics. Trick question. This slide is itself the most invulnerable, as it will live on forever. Until I throw it in the trash. Oh god, I've unleashed the Nicolas Cage beast. I was waiting on it too. I was like, I'm not gonna bring up this Nick Cage fact right now. And then I was just like, now I will. Now I will. I don't know if the rest of you in chat know, but I have a Nicolas Cage, a little bit of an obsession. I have an entire video on YouTube from the beginning of like this streaming stuff about me talking about Nicolas Cage for like 30 minutes. Will there be a Nick Cage presentation? There can be. It might be more fun to do a Nick Cage presentation than a Jesse McCartney presentation or a Freddie Prinze Jr. presentation. Final question. List an animal that can fly. Bet you can't. Bet you can't, chat. Fly. Ding, ding, ding. JTF is acing this test. Certain kinds of squirrels. They are called flying squirrels, but they glide more than anything, don't they? Superman? He is an animal. He is an animal. Did anybody ever watch Smallville? There's like this whole episode where where Clark Kent, where it's Lana, I think. She gets superpowers out of nowhere. And then like they're like so happy to be together and to be a couple, and the first thing they do is fuck. They have crazy like hardcore sex, and it's a lot. That's a lot. Why did I think about flight right now? What does this have to do with flying? I actually had a couple grapes earlier today. I had seven grapes. They're very nice. It was the last of the fruit that I had. I have a couple bananas though. What were we talking about? Superpowers that have the same vibes. Do you feel like you learned something, chat? We graduating or no? Was the test curved? It was, and unfortunately JTF kind of ruined the curve for the rest of you.